Hello, everyone. For chapter 17, again, we're nearing the end of the course. Kind of a summary of the government and the legal issues involved in compensation. And, this chapter does cover quite a bit of material. There's just a couple of concepts that I really want you to know for chapter 17. The first is maybe the biggest thing of all is what is known as the FLSA, or the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. This is one of the major laws in U.S. Employment and legal history in regards to how it has affected workers, not just back in the 1930s, but even today here in the 21st century. And the Fair Labor Standards Act had three main components. First off, that was the actual law that established minimum wage. So, every state in the U.S. and the federal government has a minimum wage. And in a lot of, principalities and cities, Chicago has one, San Francisco has one, L.A., for example, they all have minimum wages. But we have this law to thank for the creation of the minimum wage. The second concept from the FLSA was that anybody who works more than 40 hours per week is entitled to overtime. So the whole idea of overtime was created with the FLSA. If you're scheduled to work 40, if you're an hourly employee and you work 45 hours in a week, so the first 40 hours you get your normal pay, and then for the extra 5 hours that you work, that's what's considered time and a half, or 1.5 times your salary or your hourly rate. So anything over 40 is time and a half, and it was created as a result of the FLSA. And the third thing that the FLSA did was it established laws against child labor. So prior to this law, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids could, work 20, 30, 40 hours a week, sometimes in very dangerous mines and in places like that. So the FLSA reined all of that in to make sure that children were not being exposed to this type of stuff. And again, there are very strict laws now as to how much work a child can do. So again, all those three things, the minimum wage, the overtime, and the child labor laws, were created as a result of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Again, really vital law in U.S. labor history. So I want to make sure everybody knows what the FLSA is. And kind of an offshoot of that is the whole idea of employees who are exempt versus non-exempt. And again, that's probably a term that you've heard, throughout either your working time, or maybe you've heard it in another class. But whenever we're looking at, whether or not you are exempt or non-exempt, depends on whether or not you're eligible or ineligible for overtime. So if you are exempt, it means that you are not eligible for overtime. If you're non-exempt, then you are eligible. So it's kind of a flip of what you would think. So if you're exempt, it means you're not eligible. If you're non-exempt, that means you're eligible. So, and usually the way this is, there's a whole slew of things that can go into that. The easiest way to remember it, again, this does vary a little bit, but the main rule is if you are a salaried employee, where you don't have to log your hours, then you're generally exempt from overtime because you're earning a set salary. You're usually not eligible for overtime. Whereas if you are an hourly employee, so let's say you work at a place where you get paid $10 an hour, so you have to track your hours, generally then you're considered what they call non-exempt and you are eligible for overtime. So again, there's a few other little rules that go into that. I don't want to bore you with those details, but again, just kind of know the differences between exempt and non-exempt. Those are really key points to know. So the other major law that I want you to know from this chapter, again, the chapter does cover quite a few laws and rules regarding labor and employment. So the FLSA is obviously the big one, but the other one that doesn't get nearly the attention that it should get for a variety of reasons is the Equal Pay Act of 1963. It's kind of it's part of the extended Fair Labor Standards Act, but it was its own law created in 1963, the Equal Pay Act. Basically, again, it says you cannot discriminate on wages based on gender. So it was kind of the first law in our country that was created to make sure that men weren't being paid significantly more than women for essentially doing the same job. So if you have two people have the same job description and they have kind of the same, background and same skill set, you can't pay a male more than a female just because on the basis of gender. So again, and it's gone through several reiterations as time is going on, even up to today, but the basic law was created in 1963, the Equal Pay Act. Now, There are some defenses to it. So, for example, if your company has a seniority where people who have been with the company 10 years versus 1 year can get paid more, that's a defense to the affirmative act. You could pay men more than women, or women more than men for that matter, if you have a seniority where the longer you work there, the more money you earn. That's a genuine defense. Another defense is true merit or performance. So if you have, a man and a woman who have the same job, but let's say the man, or it could be the man or the woman, significantly does their job better, produces better results, has more merit, they can be paid a different wage because of the value they're creating for the company. So, and kind of the third related to that is like if you're in more like production. So, let's say you make widgets, for example, and you create a significant higher number of widgets, than versus somebody who's a different gender, you can pay different there. But absent those kind of main kind of affirmative defenses, if you will, generally it is illegal to pay men or women differently from each other if they're essentially doing the same type of work. Now, of course, we do factor things in, like, okay, well, if one person has a PhD and the other person only has a bachelor's degree, education requirements can make a difference. If one person has a year of experience, the other person has 25 years of experience, obviously that can be a pay difference as well. But again, the FLSA and the Equal Pay Act are the two big laws that I want you to know under Chapter 17. So make sure you kind of have a general working understanding of the other laws mentioned, but again, those are the two that I care the most that you know. So. Well, that really covers the core of Chapter 17 that I wanted you to know. For our purposes of our final exam, we do cover Chapter 18, which is about making it work. And again, just read through that chapter. Again, I'm not going to lecture on it, only because it's kind of just a summary of everything that we've been discussing all semester long. So make sure you read Chapter 18, because I do, include that as part of the exam review. But again, 18 is primarily kind of a review from the earliest early compensation concepts we learned through the middle part of the course, all the way through the benefits that we have recently finished, all the way until today. So 17 and 18, kind of the last aspect of the course. So that being said, congratulations, because we have made it to the end of class. So I truly appreciate all the effort that this class has put in. Thank you for your attentiveness, for your great discussions on discussion boards and anything related to it. Great work on previous exams. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of the hard work you as a class have done this semester. So best of luck on the final exam. And if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Thank you very much, everyone.